My name is Grace Taylor. For a very long time, I have learned how to make peace with memory. Yet, the older I grow, the more I realize that the childhood memories of Carrington, the barren land scorched by the sun, the acrid scent of burning grass, and the relentless whisper of wind sweeping across the fields, never truly let me go. No matter where I travel, even when I stand under the dazzling lights of Europe's grand theaters, the place where I was truly born, raised, and shaped remains Carrington, the vast farm my family clung to for generations. As a child, I hardly remember my father. Father, Thomas Taylor, existed in my life more as a name than as a flesh and blood man. He was my mother's husband, Sophie's, but never truly my father. I carried no memory of a warm embrace, no intimate laughter of his, only a void. That absence left a quiet fracture in my heart from the earliest days. My mother, Sophie, was a different figure. She was at once near and distant. In her eyes, I saw a profound sadness I was too young to understand. She loved me, I knew, but her love often weighed heavy, like a burden of stone, for it was overshadowed by another love, the one she bore for a man I, too, could never forget. Father Alexander Carrington. I grew up in the shadow of that forbidden love, though it was never spoken aloud. I saw my mother's gaze drift away whenever his name was mentioned, saw her heart tremble quietly whenever news of him arrived. And I also saw, in my younger brother Lucas, a strange radiance. Only much later did I learn the truth, that Lucas was not the son of Thomas Taylor, but the living testament of the love between my mother and Father Alexander. Yet even before I knew, I had felt the subtle favoritism in her every gesture, every word. And me? I remained Grace, the daughter bearing the name Taylor, stubborn and defiant, with eyes always yearning to break free from the shadow of my mother and the unspoken pain she carried all her life. My childhood was bound to the blazing sun of the Australian land, where every summer stretched endlessly, heavy with heat, and where the rare rains would fall only to vanish in an instant, leaving behind the pungent scent of parched earth. Carrington was a wealthy, sprawling estate, yet to a child, it was a world both magnificent and terrifying. I remember the early mornings when the wind cut sharp against our skin, and we children were roused at dawn. The men of the household, including my uncles, were already busy with cattle and pasture, while the women tended to the household chores. As for me, just a little girl, I often wandered aimlessly across the land, clambering onto rocks, plucking the few wild flowers that dared to bloom beneath the sun and wind. Carrington raised us, but it was also like a harsh mother. She could give you life, but just as easily swallow you in drought, in bushfire, in a loneliness with no escape. I grew up haunted by the fear that if I stayed, I would become part of this barren land, worn down by it until nothing remained but a hollow shell. Perhaps that is why, from very early on, I longed to break free. My brother Lucas was my opposite. He was gentle, pure, carrying an innocence that sometimes irritated me, and at other times stirred a yearning within me. He was like an angel misplaced in Carrington's unforgiving grasp. I, on the other hand, was the thorny child, rebellious and restless, never content to sit quietly and obey. I loved Lucas, yet I also envied him. I could see clearly how my mother's gaze softened more easily for him, how her smiles lingered longer in his direction. She never spoke of it, but I understood. He was the embodiment of her greatest love, while I was merely the reminder of a broken marriage. And so I told myself, if fate would not favor me, then I would create my own worth. I would live differently, walk another path, and never repeat my mother's tragedy. I would not allow love to reduce me to servitude. From those tender years, the seed of rebellion had already taken root within me, and it would grow into a burning desire to carve out my own identity. I remember vividly the first time I defied my mother. I must have been 13, an age when young girls begin to feel that the world is far too small for them. Mother told me I must learn to be feminine, to take care of the household, to conduct myself as a proper lady. But I, Grace, never wanted to be a lady. I wanted to run, to leap, to break every rule ever made. I felt different. I did not want to become someone's wife and slowly wither away in a kitchen. I did not want to live forever in Carrington, a shadow of my mother. I wanted freedom, and I began to let that stubbornness show, through a defiant gaze, a rebellious tone, and the times I slipped away into the fields to play instead of helping at home. Mother grew angry, scolding me for being headstrong, yet in her eyes I sometimes caught a fleeting glimmer of strange understanding. Perhaps she knew I was another version of herself, a version that would never allow fate to dictate her life. Though unspoken, I always knew Father Alexander was a constant presence in our lives. He came often to Carrington, and each time he appeared, the atmosphere of the entire house shifted. I, ever sensitive, sensed it at once. I saw the way my mother lifted her head, her eyes suddenly bright, only to veil them quickly. I saw Lucas cling to him as though he had found his true father. And me? I felt an unexplainable distance. He was kind to me, attentive even, but in my heart there was always a chill, as if an invisible wall stood between us. Perhaps, deep down, I had already sensed that he was the cause of all the silences, all the absences, all the fractures in our family, both its love and its tragedy. I did not hate him, but I could never love him as Lucas did. All I ever saw was the unspoken affection in his gaze toward my mother. And I swore then that I would never let love turn me into the same sorrowful prisoner my mother had become. Adolescence was a time both painful and radiant. I remember being 15, 16, when my body began to change, when strange new emotions stirred within me, emotions no one ever taught me how to name. At Carrington, everything repeated itself endlessly: the rising sun, the searing heat, cattle wandering, the smell of dry grass, the wail of wind rushing through the wooden fences. To my mother and my uncles, it was ordinary life. To me, it was a vast prison. I felt myself trapped, swallowed slowly by the monotony of that cycle. I knew I was different, not only because I was the only daughter in the family, but because I refused to accept fate. I looked at my mother, at my uncles, and whispered inwardly, "No, I will not become one of them. I will break free." My mother was a strong woman, yet her strength itself became a burden. She had endured too many losses: a loveless marriage, a man she loved all her life but could never fully have, sons taken from her by war, by accident, by cruel destiny. Perhaps that was why she wanted me to be a safe daughter, obedient, reserved, willing to accept life as it was. But I, with fire in my blood and stubbornness in my bones, could not endure that kind of safety. I remember once she caught me standing on a fence, arms outstretched as though I were about to fly. I only wanted to feel the wind, to imagine myself as a bird breaking free from Carrington. But Mother shouted, "Grace, get down this instant. Do you want to break your neck?" I laughed and called back, "I'd rather break my neck than live here forever like a prisoner." The words stunned her. Her eyes welled with tears, though her lips stayed pressed tight. I didn't understand then, but later I would realize I had spoken not only for myself, but for her too, for the dream of freedom she had carried all her life, yet never dared to live. In the village near Carrington, a few young men would sometimes try to approach me. They liked my air of defiance, my challenging eyes, the way I carried myself so unlike other girls. I knew they looked at me with curiosity, and I took advantage of it. I laughed mockingly, tossed out words meant to provoke, and then turned away, leaving bewilderment in their eyes. It wasn't because I truly liked them. It was because I wanted to test the edges of my freedom. I wanted to know if I could draw people's attention, if I could control their emotions. In that small, suffocating world, playing at love was the only thrill I could find. But deep in my heart, I never believed in love. I had seen how it destroyed my mother, how it turned her into a prisoner of a man who could never be hers. I swore, I will never let love rule my life. Lucas was always the light in our family. Gentle, pure, always willing to help others. Everyone in the village adored him, and my mother was endlessly proud. And me? I both loved him and envied him. I loved him because he was my only refuge, the only one who would listen to my rages and sorrows without judgment. But I envied him because he always received more love than I ever did. I felt like I was forever his shadow, never able to shine as brightly. Once, in despair, I shouted at my mother through my tears, "You only love Lucas. I'm nothing but a thorn in your side." She said nothing, only held me tight. She neither denied nor admitted it, and that silence hurt more than words ever could. One night I sat alone on the veranda, gazing up at the star-filled sky, and I made a vow to myself. One day I will leave this place. I will step into the world beyond, and I will succeed. I will not live in anyone's shadow, not my mother's, not Lucas's, not Father Alexander's, not anyone's. I will be myself. That was the first time in my life I felt the clarity of a destined vow, and it was that vow which later guided me, leading me out of Carrington toward the stage, the lights, and a life that was truly mine. In my teenage years, I began to see Father Alexander with different eyes. He was no longer just a tall, imposing priest, but the most powerful man whose presence shaped the fate of my entire family. I knew he loved my mother, and my mother loved him. I also knew that their love was forbidden, and it was because of that love that my mother had become such a sorrowful woman. Deep inside, I held a trace of resentment toward him. For if not for him, perhaps my mother might have loved me more. Perhaps my family would not have been so heavy with secrets and distance, and yet, at the same time, I understood. He was not only the cause, but also the victim of that very love. He chose the church, chose power, chose his path within the hierarchy of faith, at the cost of the love of his life. Whenever I looked at him, I whispered inwardly, I will never be like him, nor like my mother. I will never sacrifice my life for any love or blind devotion. In those rebellious days, I discovered something that truly set my heart alight: music and dance. Whenever I had the rare chance to listen to the radio, I let myself drift away with the melodies. I imitated dance movements I had once glimpsed in old magazines, in scattered images. When my body moved, I felt a freedom I had never known in Carrington. In those moments, I was no longer Grace, the stubborn daughter, unloved and restless. I became someone else, strong, beautiful, alive. Deep within me, I knew this was the path that would lead me out. The day I left Carrington, the sun was merciless. Its rays beat down upon the scorched fields, making the air quiver like a thin veil. I remember turning my back on the weathered old house where I had spent my entire childhood, my heart torn between relief and sorrow. I did not cry. I would not allow myself to cry. For I knew that if a single tear fell, I might never find the courage to walk away. I clenched my fists and told myself, this is the beginning. My life will not end here. I boarded the train, carrying only a small suitcase with a few clothes, a worn pair of shoes, and a heart brimming with longing. I didn't know exactly where I was going or what I would do, but I knew I had to find a place where my dream of dancing, could become real. I arrived in Sydney. The city was noisy, crowded, unfamiliar, so utterly different from barren Carrington. I was like a fledgling bird leaving the nest, lost amid the towering buildings and the rushing tide of people. The money I had brought was meager, enough to rent a tiny room in a working-class neighborhood and to eat sparingly. By day, I did whatever work I could find, waiting tables at cafes, scrubbing floors, even working shifts in a packing factory. By night, I devoted myself entirely to the cheap dance classes I managed to discover. There were nights when my feet swelled and bled from practice. I lay on the rickety bed, staring at the stained ceiling, asking myself, is it worth it? Am I wasting my life chasing a foolish dream? But immediately, a fire flared within me. No, this is the only path that makes me feel truly alive. Little by little, through persistence and a touch of natural talent, I was accepted into a more serious training program. There, I learned not only dance, but also how to command my body, how to convey emotions through every movement. At first, many of my classmates mocked me, a country girl with a heavy accent, outdated clothes, daring to dream of great stages. But I paid them no mind. I poured into my training all the stubbornness and defiance I had carried from Carrington. I practiced harder than they did, rose quicker after each fall, endured more pain than any of them. My dance teacher, an elderly man who had once been a celebrated performer in Europe, told me one day, "Grace, you may not have the finest technique, but you have fire, and fire matters more than anything else." His words were like a gust of wind fanning my hunger into flame. I knew then, I had chosen the right path. The big city was never an easy place for a young girl with no one to stand behind her. I had wages stolen from me, endured harassment, survived on instant noodles for a week because I couldn't afford more. There were nights I cried alone in my tiny room, missing my mother, missing Lucas, even missing harsh Carrington. But that longing never pulled me back. On the contrary, it became my strength. I told myself, if I give up, I will return empty-handed. I will be trapped once more in my mother's shadow, in Carrington's grasp. No, I must go on. Solitude became my constant companion. I grew accustomed to having no one by my side. I grew accustomed to hearing only the music, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the studio. Slowly, I learned how to turn pain into strength, how to make loneliness a part of my art. The opportunity came on a winter evening. A small dance troupe was preparing a performance but lacked a dancer. I was chosen to replace a girl who had been injured. It was only a minor role, one that drew little praise, but to me, it was nothing short of miraculous. When the lights came on, when the music swelled, I felt I had been born to stand upon the stage. All the pain, all the hardship, all the loneliness melted away. Only one thing remained: freedom. The audience did not remember my name after that night, but I remembered. I knew that for the first time I had touched my dream, and I would never let it slip away. From that small role, other opportunities began to appear. I was invited to join touring companies across the country, and then abroad. I traveled through cities and nations, stepping onto countless stages. Each time I walked into the light, I recalled the vow I had made at 16, beneath the star-filled sky. I will escape Carrington, I will live my own life. And I had done it. I became Grace Taylor, the dancer. Not Sophie's daughter, not Lucas's sister, not the shadow of anyone else. I was myself. But the path of art is not paved only in glory, it demands sacrifice. I gave my youth to rehearsal halls. I gave up the chance for romance, for family, because I feared the chains they might bring. I trusted only in my legs, in my wings of freedom. There were many times when I felt exhausted, so lonely I thought I would collapse. But in those moments I remembered Carrington, my mother's unfinished love, her shadowed life, and I told myself, "You cannot go back. Go on, Grace." And I went on. The years I spent upon the stage gradually brought me recognition. My name appeared in a few art journals, and I was invited to tour in Europe. The spotlight found me, but I realized that fame could never replace family. While I poured myself into performance, my mother grew older, and Lucas, the brother I loved most, chose a path that filled me with unease. He decided to become a priest. I laughed bitterly when I heard the news. I even quarreled fiercely with him. "Are you mad, Lucas? A life bound by rules, by chains? Do you want to turn yourself into another Alexander?" Lucas only looked at me with his gentle eyes. "Grace, you don't understand. To me, this isn't bondage, it's freedom. I want to give my life to God." I stormed off in anger, but inside I trembled with fear. I was afraid he would vanish from me, just as so many other men had slipped away from my mother's life. The day Lucas was ordained was the day I felt the world turn its back on me. He wore a white robe, his eyes shining, his smile serene. The entire family beamed with pride. My mother wept tears of joy. Only I could not bring myself to smile. After the ceremony, I pulled him outside into the sunlit courtyard. I gripped his hand tightly like a child and asked, "Do you ever think of me? What will happen to me if I lose you?" He embraced me, whispering softly, "You're always in my heart, sister. But Grace, each of us must walk our own path. You have the stage. I have my faith." I wanted to scream, to hold him back, but his clear, unwavering eyes stole the words from my throat. I could only remain silent, clinging to him for as long as I could, not knowing it would be our last embrace. A few months later, while I was on tour in Rome, the news reached me. Lucas, during a summer holiday in Greece, had drowned while trying to save a swimmer in distress. I collapsed on the studio floor. I could not believe it. I would not believe it. How could the gentle, saintly boy who had always protected me vanish so easily? I rushed to Greece, but all that awaited me was a coffin. I looked upon his face one last time, serene, beautiful, as though he were only asleep. The pain tore through my heart, a wound that I knew would never heal. It felt as if half my soul had been ripped away. At Lucas's funeral, I saw my mother truly break. She had lost many sons, but losing Lucas, the only child born of her greatest love, was a grief beyond compare. I watched her weep until she fainted, watched her cling to Father Alexander, who was no less stricken, in a rare moment of helplessness. From a distance, I looked at them, caught between rage and pity. I raged because it was their forbidden love that had brought Lucas into the world, only for cruel fate to take him away. But I pitied them too, because I knew my mother had now lost everything. And in that moment, I swore, I will never let love turn me into a creature of loss, like my mother. After Lucas's death, I threw myself into work with greater ferocity. I danced until I collapsed from exhaustion, accepted every tour, and stood on the stage more than ever before. People praised me for my intensity, for the raw power of my emotions. Some even said I was like a living flame, but I knew that flame was fueled by grief. Every step I took on stage was a silent cry. I did not dance only for the audience, I danced for him, for the brother who now lay beneath the blue sea. And yet, when the nights fell and the lights dimmed, I was empty again. I drank more, I felt lonelier, and at times I even thought of surrendering it all. But still I rose, because I knew if I gave up, I would betray not only myself, but also Lucas. One truth became clear to me. My life was entwined with destiny, like a piece of music already written. I had rebelled to escape my mother's unfinished love story, to avoid becoming another Sophie. And yet, I could not escape loss. Losing Lucas taught me this. No one can outrun fate. We can only choose how to face it. I chose to turn pain into strength, to make loss the force that drove me forward. I chose to remain on the stage, singing my own song, even if that song was steeped in tears. It was in Europe, during one of those tours, that I met Gregor Altenburg. He was not an artist, nor a man of the stage. He was a German diplomat, attending the theater one evening when I performed. I still remember the way he looked at me the first time. Not with desire or curiosity, as I so often saw in men's eyes, but with a quiet gaze, as if he had read within my movements a long story of pain and longing. After the performance, he sought me out. His voice was gentle, deliberate, carrying a cadence unlike any I had heard before. I, who had long grown accustomed to brushing aside flattery and advances, found myself unable to be cold toward him. Perhaps it was because, in his eyes, I glimpsed understanding. I did not open my heart easily. Lucas's death, my mother's unfinished love for Father Alexander, a life full of scars, all of it had left me afraid of love. I had sworn never to let anyone control my life, never to let my heart be bound. So when Gregor drew near, I resisted. I told him bluntly, I don't believe in love. I don't believe in happiness between two people. If you're looking for a fleeting adventure, I'm not the one. He only smiled, calm and steady, and replied, Grace, I don't want to change you. I only want to be by your side, when you allow it. His answer unsettled me. All my life I had seen love as a chain, but with him, I saw no chain. I saw a safe space where I could remain myself, free from judgment. We met many times after that, during tours, over simple dinners, in long conversations that stretched for hours. He never pressured me, never demanded anything. He listened, letting me speak, letting me cry, letting me rage. Little by little, I realized I was no longer alone. Once, I confessed to him, You don't know. I once thought I would die alone. I never believed anyone could stay by my side for long. He took my hand, held it firmly, and said, You don't have to die alone. Not as long as I am here. Those simple words soothed me like medicine. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to trust a man. My love with Gregor was not fiery, not tempestuous like in romantic novels. It was quiet, steady, like a deep river silently nourishing its banks. I still danced, still traveled the world. He remained busy with his diplomatic work. Yet between us stretched an invisible thread. Each time we met again, I felt at peace. I realized that love did not have to mean obsession, loss, or pain. It could be companionship, a hand clasping yours as you walk forward. Perhaps it was because I had lost so much, my childhood, my father, Lucas, that I had finally learned how to cherish this mature, enduring love. Through Gregor, I slowly learned to forgive myself, and to forgive my mother. I had once resented her for loving Alexander, for giving more of her affection to Lucas than to me. But in loving Gregor, I understood. We cannot choose whom we love, nor can we command our own hearts. I began to see my mother through different eyes, eyes of compassion. I understood that her love for Father Alexander was not weakness, but destiny. And that destiny, though it brought her sorrow, also gave her brief joy and brought Lucas into the world, the one I loved most of all. I no longer wanted to flee from the past. I accepted it, as a part of what made me who I am. One evening in Rome, Gregor proposed. There was no glittering ring, no roses, only a whispered promise. Grace, let me walk with you through the rest of your life. I was silent for a long time. In my mind, I saw my mother. I saw Lucas. I saw my childhood at Carrington. It was as if they all asked me, "Will you dare? Will you dare to love?" And then I nodded. Not because I believed in eternal love, but because I had learned that to live is to open one's heart, even if it risks pain again. That was the moment I felt truly grown. My love for Gregor did not take me away from the stage. I still danced, still burned with all my being. But now I had a home to return to. I had a man who was always there, listening, waiting. I no longer saw life as a chain of losses. I felt I had reconciled with fate. Perhaps that is what I had been searching for all along. Not perfect love, but peace within love. Now, as I sit to write these words, my youth has long since slipped behind me. Lines etch my face, and the hands that were once supple for the movements of dance are now calloused and trembling. I can no longer stand upon the stage, no longer hear the roaring applause of the audience, but I have time to look back. And when I do, I see a life full of contradictions, of pain, but also of pride. I was the stubborn daughter of Carrington, the rebel who defied fate. I have lost, I have loved, I have envied, I have hated, but I have also learned to forgive and to open my heart. And I understand now, without those sorrows, I would not be the Grace I am today. In memory, my mother always appears with her vast, sorrowful eyes. She was a woman who loved with all her being, yet whose love became her wound. I once resented her, but later, when I came to love Gregor, I understood. She, too, was only human, fragile and strong at once, carried by love to the very edge of the abyss. I know she died in grief for Lucas, but also in peace, for at last she could rest, no longer torn apart. I like to think that somewhere, she and Father Alexander can look upon each other without fear. When I remember my mother now, I am no longer the reproachful daughter. I am a grown woman who knows that love always comes at a price. Not a single day passes without me remembering Lucas. He was the best part of our family, the living proof of my mother's forbidden yet blazing love. His life was brief, but he lived like a candle burning bright, lighting the way for others. His death broke me, but it also taught me this. Life is not measured by its length, but by how we live each moment. Each time I stepped onto the stage, I thought of him. And now, though I no longer dance, I still see him smiling in my memory, as gentle as ever. If my mother loved Alexander and suffered all her life, I loved Gregor and found peace. That love came late, but precisely because it came late, I cherished it more. Gregor never turned me into someone dependent, never asked me to give up my dreams. He only stood beside me, quietly. Through him, I learned that love is not a chain, but companionship. I am grateful to him, for his patience with a woman as thorny and scarred as I am. If there is one truth I want to leave behind for the world, it is this. Love may not always resemble what we read in books, but when it becomes a haven of peace, it is nothing short of a miracle. There is an old legend I heard as a child. The thornbird sings only once in its life, and its song is so beautiful that even the angels pause to listen. But to sing it, the bird must hurl itself into the thorns, and the sharpest spine pierces its breast. In its greatest agony, it sings its most perfect song. I think my life has been like that bird's. I have paid in blood, in tears, in irreparable losses. But because of them, I was able to sing my own song, on stage, in love, in life. And that song, whether remembered or forgotten, I know it once existed. If anyone were to ask me what the most important lesson I learned was, I would say this: freedom is not escape. It is the courage to live true to oneself, no matter the cost. Love is not always destruction. if you find someone willing to walk beside you without binding you. Loss is not an ending. It is the way we grow, and the way we come to treasure what remains. I am not perfect. I have erred. I have rebelled. I have wounded both my mother and myself, yet I do not regret it. For every scar has taught me a lesson, and every tear has nourished a part of who I am. Now, as the twilight of life descends, I sit by the window, watching the last rays of the day stretch across unfamiliar rooftops in Europe. I am no longer in Carrington, yet Carrington still flows through my veins, an origin that can never be erased. I close my eyes and hear, deep within my heart, a strange melody. Perhaps it is the song of the thornbird, its one and only song, born of pain, yet achingly beautiful, etched forever into my soul. And I smile, because at last I have sung my own song.